Prynawn da, bon après-midi, and good afternoon to everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar on export opportunities for the tech sector in France. My name is Ruth Stockley, and I'm one of the Welsh Government's international trade advisors based here in Wales, working with Welsh companies to increase Welsh exports all across the globe. You may be aware that France is Wales's biggest second export market in Europe, and so we're very pleased that this afternoon we'll be taking a closer look at some of the opportunities in this market for companies such as yourselves. Welsh Government has 21 offices in 12 countries, and a major part of their role is to foster trade links with their host countries, and so we're really grateful this afternoon to our French team based in Paris for organising today's session. In a few minutes, I'll hand over to Yvonne Van Houten, who is the head of our French office. But we're also delighted that we're joined this afternoon by Phil Jones, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Airbus Cybersecurity, Isabel Hurley, who is Head of Tech France in the Department for International Trade at the British Embassy in Paris, and also Nick Pierce, who is co-founder of award-winning software company Object Matrix. Before we get started, I would like to run through some housekeeping, please, if we could have that slide. And so the first thing for me to say is please ensure that your audio and video are turned off if you haven't already done so. Also, we'd like to make you aware that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded onto the Business Wales Export Zone in the next few days. So if you have any concerns about that, then it may be best to leave the session. I'd also like to make you aware that we will be taking questions. Our panel will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So please use the chat function to post any questions that you may have, and then, as I said, they'll be answered at the end. And then finally, we'll endeavour to respond to any questions that we either don't have time to answer or perhaps are outside of our expertise or experience at this point. We will endeavour to come back to everyone with answers via email at a later date. Next, please. Slide, please. Before we get started, I'd like to before we hand over to Yvonne, I'd like to briefly run through the agenda so you know what to expect. It will be around an hour in duration, thereabouts, and we anticipate that we will cover the following things. So we've already covered introductions. We're then going to hand over to Phil Jones for him to talk about trade experiences between Wales and France. Isabel then will cover off the tech opportunities in the French market, and then Nick Pierce of Object Matrix will give a case study on actually what it's like to do business in France as a tech company. And so I'd like to hand over immediately now to Yvonne, who will host this session for us. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Ruth. As Ruth mentioned, I'm the head of the Welsh Government France office, one of the 22 or 21 offices we have overseas. And I work in Paris together with my colleague Jordan James, who is also on this call. We are quite a young office, so I was asked to open the office in France just over 2 years ago, after there hadn't been a Welsh representation for nearly 10 years. So we're now we're 2 and a bit years in, and we're starting to feel more established as an office. We take a whole government approach to delivering economic, cultural and other sort of positive outcomes for the people of Wales. We work, so we have a strategy for an international strategy for Wales, which we implement overseas, including in France. This strategy is focused on raising the profile of Wales internationally to grow the economy and create job opportunities by increasing exports and inward investment, and to establish Wales as a globally responsible nation. The themes of this strategy are sort of thematic areas of activity are around creativity, technology and sustainability. And the key sectors are cybersecurity, compound semiconductors and creative industries. But we also look after other sectors such as aerospace, really important for Wales as well, food and drink, important for the whole of the UK, obviously, including Wales, renewable energy and nuclear. And with the opening of the office in France, I really hope we expect to develop stronger bonds with France in terms of trade and investment, but also in the areas of tourism, education and culture. We currently have a particular focus on Brittany because we have an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding between Brittany and Wales, and we're about to re-sign the action plan under this MOU. But we also work closely with other regions in France. In the embassy, we work very closely together with the Department for International Trade. It's a relatively big team. And we also work with colleagues in SDI, Scotland Development International, and the Scottish Government, as well as with other colleagues in other teams. So we very much work in collaboration with them, and we're co-located with them in the embassy. Normally we would do these things like trade missions in person. That's really quite powerful because you can make these personal connections and personal introductions. But we have actually found that these webinars also are very valuable. So I'm really pleased to see a really good list of speakers today. I'm very grateful for your contribution to this. I think I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Phil Jones, who will talk about his experience of working in France.
Thanks, Yvonne. I guess I'm going to start with the usual introduction, which is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, excellent. So now we've got those out of the way. So so I'm just going to take you through, I suppose, my experiences of working internationally between the UK and France particularly, and my experiences over the last few years of the French environment, particularly with a technology perspective. If we can go to the next slide, please. I'll just give you a quick overview of me. So it's in the introduction, I was introduced as the Chief Operating Officer of Cybersecurity. I'm sort of slightly moving my role at the moment into a specific role looking at cybersecurity services, which is a new and exciting opportunity for me. But my career history goes back constantly in technology. I worked in England, and I always find it quite amusing that I have to break these down in this way. I worked in England for 6 years for a laser technology company. My PhD is in medical laser physics. I then worked for an international company called Thales, which is actually a French company. So I had a lot of exposure to French colleagues. I was based in Scotland for the first half of that period, doing a variety of things, and then in England again for the subsequent half of that 20-year period, touching on different sorts of technologies from optronics, avionics, missile electronics, and ultimately electronic security products. I then, about 6 or 7 years ago, moved to work for Airbus Defence and Space, and actually ran the UK cybersecurity business, which is based in Wales. We have about 200 people just outside of Newport, and we have a very strong relationship there with the Welsh Government, and really value the support that they give us, both locally but also internationally. And then 4 years ago, I moved out here to Paris. So I'm based in Paris now, although I will be returning to the UK later on this year. So I've been surprised, actually, even in the last 4 years, how much I've learned about working with French colleagues that I probably thought I knew, but hadn't really realised how little I knew in those preceding 22 years. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. All good to start with a quote. My German colleague, so we're a very international team here. My German colleague gave me this quote several months ago as I was struggling to settle into the French environment. You have to really understand the Germans to love them, but really you have to start with loving the French to get anywhere close to understanding them. And I think you have to sort of really try and get inside that inside of your head and some other things inside your head when trying to work in a French environment. And maybe I'll try and give you some insights to that in the course of the next few slides. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a view of the French ecosystem for technology as I see it. So two things here. One is these are my personal views. I know these slides are on they're Airbus slides, but of course these are my views. So I take responsibility for that, and they shouldn't be attributed as being the views of Airbus. They're also very much set in the context of my experiences working in a defence and security environment. And working on particular technologies. So maybe your experiences are slightly different, but these are my experiences, and this is how I would sort of synthesize my experience. So the first of the points that I would make, or at least maybe the context, is France loves technology. So it's a technology advanced nation and sees itself as quite superior in many ways in that, and we'll come back to that theme. But strangely enough, France also sees itself as something of an island within Europe. I once said to somebody about America being an island, and they said, and the UK being an island, and they said, yes, but we're an island as well. So it has this sort of mentality of being an island and quite sovereign. And there are a few indicators to that I would pick out. France is not, on the whole, fully committed to Europe, although as a nation it is, as an individual it's less so. And in industry, you can see experiences where it sustains a unique fast jet capability and doesn't participate in what you know as Typhoon, but the Eurofighter program. Even within the world of Airbus, we recently made a decision that we would go our own way and move away from Microsoft and towards Google. Now, you might say many other companies are doing that, but it was all, for me, it's almost a statement of, look, we will determine what we want to do. Thank you very much. We're not going to follow the crowd. And the last example on there is the fact that the twin rotor Chinooks that you're all probably familiar with don't exist over here in France, or only now are they beginning to talk about acquiring them from the US. So there's this sort of sense of identity and uniqueness and being an island that is in the psyche of France and the French market. And that leads me on to the second point, which is that brand France is very, very important to the typical French manager. No one should ever insult another nation, but it feels to me to be particularly strong here in France. The French can argue with each other, and they can go on strike, and they can do all of those things. But if anyone ever tries to challenge the concept of France, then woe betide you, because brand France is very important, and that comes into the context of business and industry quite frequently. This is what France needs. This is where France is going. And in my particular world, I've got two examples at the moment where brand France is being exemplified by the establishment of what we call campus cyber, just in the outskirts of Paris, where France is putting all its key cyber companies together. And everybody is willingly going in this direction to be on this one campus to create a brand centre for cyber in France, and it will project externally as well. So it's very, very strong in that sense. And Yvonne talked about Brittany. So in Brittany, there's a Pôle d'Excellence de Cyber, the PEC, which is another centre of excellence, really about projecting brand France, this time in very high-tech, government-orientated cybersecurity. And my last point on this slide is it touches on almost the first point I think I made, which is France. It does love technology, and technology runs through its veins. There's a lot of fantastic research which is done here in France, but one of the interesting things is that ability to transition technology into business. It has proven quite elusive. There's a program, PIA, the program d'Investissement d'Avenir, the program of future investment, which, as far as I understand, is aimed at trying to address that. So it knows it has a problem, and struggles to transition technology. So it has this appetite for technology, but it likes its own technology. It's quite sovereign in the way that it thinks and acts. And you can see almost this contrast when you look at what you might call the fortune companies, the large companies. There are very few technology companies in there. They're insurance, or assurance as it's called here, oil and gas, the construction, and we're all familiar with the luxury goods. So it loves its technology but hasn't managed to transition it. And all of these things come together in a sort of heady mix of the culture that, if you're trying to export into the French market, you have to be aware of. The pride that there is in the country, the pride that there is in the ability to develop own technology, and such like. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So a few more things. France very much does promote startups. There's a number of initiatives to promote its own startups, but it also really strongly reinforces its national champions. I don't think I fully realised until I came over here just how much that happens. But I guess when you go look back into the UK and you see the presence of some French companies like EDF, that have been heavily sponsored as national champions, and have become quite international. That's because of the way that France has promoted its national champions, and it does that in my industry as well, in not just Airbus, but with Thales before. And that's almost a reflection of the fact that many technologies or technology areas are seen as sovereign. So come back to this concept of France very much being a sovereign or an island nation, and wanting to be self-sufficient, wanting to have some degree of independence. So the barriers to entry, frankly, are quite challenging in some areas. The rewards are there, but I wanted to be very honest. Some of the challenges exist in terms of sovereign technology areas. So cybersecurity is a very sovereign technology. Stealth in the area of defence, pharmaceuticals, AI, defence generally, rail, automotive. I could put aviation on there as well. Seen as quite sovereign. So you need to understand if the marketplace that you're trying to play in is a sovereign area and what that means for the routes into the market. Next point here, France, unlike the UK government, dare I say, and I'm entitled to my opinions, France government will have an industrial strategy. It will say, we want to be strong in this. What does it take to be strong in this? How do we protect our own industry? How do we create competencies? Okay, things that, and how do we promote overseas sales? How do we do all of those things? There is a much closer collaboration between French government and French industry, which is embodied, of course, through the belief and the desire to have a clear strategy towards things. So I think I'm laying a landscape which says it's not very easy. There are ways into this, of course, and I'll come to those in the next slide. But the last point to note here is France is extremely bureaucratic. Honestly, I had no idea how bureaucratic France was, but it is, and you can many reasons why that might be the case. You can go back to Napoleon, you can go back to other people's understanding of history will be much better than mine. But one of the things I would note is that the people that go into industry, the people that go into government at the very high levels, they all go to the same school or same cluster of schools, and they quite easily move between industry and politics and backwards and forwards. Whereas in the UK, we don't tend to see that quite as much. And if we do see people moving, normally we expect them to stand back for some period of time before reappearing. And certainly that's my experience when dealing with government officials in the defence environment. They have to take a step away. But that's not quite the same. France and industry and government much more closely aligned, and it's almost a summation of all those points that I've made, because there is an industrial strategy, because it sees certain things as sovereign. So these things are all connected together. Next slide, please. Just a very quick touch on the European market without really talking about Brexit. a couple of things that I just wanted to make as points. Cross-border cooperation is we hear the language of cross-border cooperation more and more, particularly between France and Germany. So Germany is an ally, is a colleague to France, and it's therefore it's potentially also a route into the French market. But they also find it quite difficult at times. There's lots of reasons why there have been some false starts. Transnational collaboration projects often help in this scope. And there's a thing here in mainland Europe called FCAS, which in the UK the equivalent is a thing called Tempest. It's the next generation fighter. This will promote more collaboration within Europe than it will promote collaboration elsewhere. But if that landscape changes and Tempest comes into the FCAS program or vice versa, then I think there'll be much more collaboration between the nations again. We have a large contract supporting cybersecurity within the European institutions, the European community, and we hear them talking more and more about European sovereignty. And two reasons for that. One is the European shareholders want to see where their euros are being spent, and they like to see that they're being spent within the boundaries of the Eurozone, but also increasingly about sovereignty and security and being able to maintain those things. And I find it difficult at the moment to know where the UK sits in that sort of drift in and out of being a secure partner or not. But certainly this is a language that I hear within Europe. Next slide, please. So what can we do about it? So both Ruth and Yvonne mentioned the fact that there are Welsh Government has offices, and I think Ruth mentioned the fact that France is in fact the second largest export market for Wales. And I think the ability to navigate the pathways and the bureaucracy that is offered by government connections is really important. Airbus is a pretty large company. We have quite a lot of clout. But we still make very good use of the connections of the Welsh government and other governments as well, because we have to navigate these complex routes also. And whether you're large or whether you're small, the governments of the UK are there to support us. If you're exporting or importing to France technology, make sure you understand the certification landscape. My experience is that France is much more orientated towards regulation via certification than the UK is. So I had this. I actually had this argument once with Liam Fox on this very topic. France uses certifications to set standards, but also as a way of managing the national competitions or even the international competitions. But it does allow non-French companies to participate in the certification processes. But because it's bureaucratic, you have to be prepared and tenacious to manage that and to stay with it over the long term, which again brings me back to why it's important to understand and use government connections to help you. Being part of a larger program allows you to navigate or maybe even avoid some of those challenges. Not necessarily the certification one, but that whole complexity. So finding a partner to be a sponsor, finding a prime contractor, particularly one that has a presence in UK and France. So finding a UK holding of a French company or a UK holding of a UK company that's also got presence in France, and building those relationships. Maybe I didn't mention it on the slide, but in the UK we tend to be quite transactional. In France, it's much more relational. So I think about how do you build a relationship and build on that and figure that out. And of course, I'm going to say primes and systems integrators as well, like Airbus, like Thales, but like many other larger organisations, are a really good way to get into French industry. We always look for innovative tech companies. We have a standing body that looks at this, but of course it has to solve the problem that we've got. Perhaps a more tried and trusted route is to find a reseller. There are plenty of resellers organisations within France. When I ran Thales eSecurity, I ran that from the UK, and we used resellers all across Europe, including in France. We additionally had our own small sales force, but we were selling through resellers. So that's also a well-proven and very effective way of doing things. And the last way, of course, is to find some way to be present. Now, you could be present in Europe. Being present in France is better. So, you know, being present is good. And last point on here, when I showed these slides to a French colleague of mine, and I asked him for advice, he said, don't forget to tell everybody that if you're doing business in France, you'll be expected to pay taxes in France. Now, I don't know whether that was just his personal view or actually a widely held view, but this being part of the French ecosystem fully is actually very important, or could be very important to establishing a foothold, a presence, an existence in the French market as well. Next slide, please. Should be my last slide. There you go. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Phil. I find that very informative. Your your personal background and experience and insights on the France market, on the European market, and really practical advice on what we can do about it, how we can overcome barriers or challenges or obstacles. So really helpful. Thank you. I forgot to mention earlier that we really welcome people to ask questions, but I'd like to suggest to do that at the end rather than after each presentation. So please prepare for questions at the end, and you can put them either in the chat box on the side or just turn on your microphone and ask them in person. Then I'd like to move on to our next speaker. That's our colleague Isabel from the Department for International Trade, who will talk about the tech opportunities in the French market.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, and I just wanted to thank also Phil for his excellent presentation. I thought that his personal experience was very true to the French environment currently. And but I'll try not to repeat some of the cultural aspects because obviously Phil described it very well. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to take my camera off simply because I am in the office and I have to have my mask. So be better if I have my camera off. Thank you. So I wanted to talk to you about how DIT, Department for International Trade, support UK entrepreneurs. So who are we? So I'm just going to go very quickly because I only have 15 minutes. So Department for International Trade mission is to promote and grow sustainable UK export to France. And support potential SMEs from across the whole of the UK. And this is very important to us because obviously we work very closely with the Welsh government and with Yvonne and her team. We obviously do also some investment promotion to ensure that the UK remains a top destination for foreign direct investment and capital investment from France and from Europe. The UK, we implement the TCA, the Trade Cooperation Agreement, and ensure market access. And this is a very important thing for us. To work on this, on ensuring that the TCA is well managed and we get to our own goal. On this point, we also promote obviously Global Britain, and that includes a high campaigns, very strong campaigns on clean growth and technology, trade and investment campaigns. We obviously support the successful delivery of COP26 and the G7 presidencies. So who are we? I've just described that, but who are we in France? So we are a team of 25 plus people covering many sectors in France to help British companies to export. But what about tech? As you know, tech is cross-cutting, horizontal, across many other sectors. So it is a great challenge, but a great opportunity to support every part of the traditional economy, such as solution in tech, in smart cities, or in healthcare. This is what we have reflected in our new organization by having sector experts with added tech applications. And why is it important for us? Because you may have developed a technology in Wales that applies to a particular sector. And in that case, we would involve our sectoral experts to reach out, key contacts in that field. So you will see in more details when you receive this presentation, the various subsectors that we are dealing with. Next slide, please. So Phil talked about France and everything that is going on with respect to technologies and so on. So I'm going to talk to you about La French Tech. So in 2015, France put together a huge network of 13 French tech capitals, 38 French tech communities in France, and 48 French tech communities based in 100 cities all over the world. Every day, they stimulate their local ecosystem. Obviously, they are committed to developing it and supporting French tech goals. But I guess you know, you want to figure out how, you know, how do you reach out to them? So you have a French tech in London, for example, but obviously France is all about startups, communities, major companies such as Airbus, events, news, associations. So it can be all a bit confusing. So just to give you a bit more understanding, Paris, with Paris being the third biggest European startup metropole, and France surpassing Germany and challenging UK as an investment destination, we now know that this is thanks to this French government launched of the French tech, which was created at the time to protect startups and give more visibility to the French innovation and mostly these young companies. And with Station F, as you can see on this slide, which aims to become the world's largest startup incubator with capacity to host 1,000 startups. So France is stepping forward as a startup nation. That was the President Macron ambition, to become a scale-up nation, which is what I want to talk about in the next slide. Thank you. So, what happened with France recovery? In order to address the economic consequences of COVID-19, on September 2020, the French government set out its France Relance recovery plan. So this is a massive 100 billion euros investment plan, representing the equivalent of 1/3 of the annual state budget, with 40 billion euros provided by the European Union in order to support businesses, rethink production models, transform infrastructure, and invest in training, and help support its openness to foreign investors. Next slide, please. So this is one of the examples of this France Relance. As we are entering in France, and as in fact post-COVID all over the world, I would say, the new phase of the digital transformation at all levels of our society. President Macron, in his latest announcement, which was on 21st of January 2021, has launched the Quantum organization, the Quantum, to transform the IT and the industry. So France's ambition on the Quantum is to put France at the third rank on the global market after China and the US. But if you look at this slide, you can see the 10 priority sectors that President Macron is looking at via France Relance: cloud computing, quantum technologies, digital health, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, innovative therapies, infectious diseases, edtech, cultural and creative industries, and space industries. I'll talk about some of them in the next slide. Thank you. So, opportunities in the French market. We should see in the list of all of the opportunities raised by France Relance. And we are, as DIT, really concentrating on some of them, mainly 5G, AI, quantum, and cloud. So I'm going to talk about 5G to start with. So we see opportunity in private 5G deployment, which represent a real opportunity for mobile operators, network equipment providers, and more broadly for companies in the industrial sector. So there is a growing opportunity to improve collaboration on key thematics area of 5G commercially, to support UK companies to export to France. This will include connecting with system integrators, small cell vendors, eSIMs applications, and we are working very closely with clusters in France, such as Systematics, French clusters all over France, as you've seen in a map earlier. We work also with Bordeaux, with various, in Lyon, Paris, but also Grenoble, so many French technopoles, and obviously some major French corporates. And we are aiming to organize an event to showcase the best of 5G private networks technologies to French partners, integrators, and demonstrate the best of 5G private networks via presentation of 5G diversification strategy that the UK also is putting into place. So we've got a lot to learn and a lot to export to the French market on this particular opportunity. Next slide, please. On 5G, I've just given you this example of the latest acceleration strategy on 5G, which has been put into place on the 1st of March. So this is very, very current. So the government has also launched a consultation on the acceleration strategy on 5G and future telecommunications network technologies as part of the France Relance. Next slide, please. So just giving you some understanding of some of the key activities that we are organizing at DIT, and where we obviously want to welcome as many Welsh companies in those. So firstly, we, as I was explaining earlier, we are working with different technopoles in France and clusters. One of them is based in Bordeaux, so the wine area, as you know. And we will be promoting on the investment side more the global Britain, and Britain is open for business. But so it's going to be a virtual presentation of one of our tech specialists about this opportunity, and how their companies may be interested in investing in the UK. However, this is a two-way engagement with this technopole, where they are also very keen to hear about UK companies and Welsh companies, especially within the 5G that we are currently planning. So if you are interested in any of those topics, I'll be able to send you a presentation of this technopole, so that as they are dealing with many different sectors as well, which could be one of your sector. On the 5th and 6th of May, we are organizing a UK-France Quantum Opportunities, and I will be very happy to send you a link, as it's open also to any companies in the UK. As there will be sessions on the second day, which will include 6-minute pitches from 5 companies, so which will be vetted by the University of Bristol. So if you're interested, again, please do not hesitate to come back to me on this point. And finally, I only have 2 minutes left. I wanted to talk about another opportunity for you, is to attend Vivatech. So Vivatech this year is taking place on the 16th to the 19th of June 2021. Obviously, because of COVID, this event will be a hybrid event. What you may be interested in is to attend this event, if not physically, perhaps virtually. And I've sent you here some opportunities for you. So opportunities to apply to startup challenges. This will enable you, if you are selected, to pitch your solution or showcase your startup. It's also an opportunity to collaborate with their major partners, international group or organizations, as listed in the slide. And also, in order to help you to understand perhaps the tech ecosystem in France, I would very much encourage you to select this link, which will enable you to register to a Vivatech tour in Lyon, Marseille, Aix, and Bordeaux. What is great about that is that when you register, you can also obviously meet other people, other businesses in those areas, which will enable you to start getting some understanding of the tech ecosystem in those cities, but also starting to engage with some French business people. I think that's all for me. I hope that was interesting, and obviously I remain totally at your disposal if you need any more information or if you need any links which would help you to go any further in this within the French market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel. I thought it was very informative. It's clear that I hear strong echo. Can we do something about that? I'll just carry on. Maybe it's just me. Sorry, Isabel, thank you. That was really helpful. It was clear you and your team are experts for DIT France in tech. It was good to make participants aware of the fact that there are offices, other offices in France, in Bordeaux and Lyon, and that we work very closely together as a team. So you look after the whole of the UK and we focus on Wales in particular, but we are part of the extended team, which means we can offer sort of complementary service to people who are looking for support, and we're here to support Welsh companies to export to France. So hopefully this is an introduction, and this will enable people to get in touch if they have specific questions, which can be asked after our last speaker, or of course we'd be very happy to arrange follow-up meetings with companies.
Absolutely, Yvonne. Thank you for reinforcing that. That's very important to us too, because we have been doing quite a lot of tech roadshows all together. So it shows that we work well together.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And it's not always that clear to companies. So I just wanted to make sure that people understand that. So looking at the time, I'd like to move on to our next speaker. It's Nick Pearce, who will talk about his experience of doing business in France. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Pearce. If I can get more of a huge desire that we do keep exporting to France there. Next slide. So a little introduction to myself. Born in Bridgend, brought up and educated in Llanyston and Bryn Tyrion Comprehensive in the area. Went on to the Uni of Wales, where I studied computing and French, as it happened. And from there, went into telecoms for Bell Labs, AT&T, Lucent Technologies, as a software engineer. And as I worked for EMC, one of the largest storage companies in the world, in Belgium, it became clear I could probably talk better than I could type. So I got moved into a more sales and marketing role. And in 2003, in Belgium, we started Object Matrix. So I'm a co-founder of Object Matrix and also an organization called Global Welsh. If you haven't heard of Global Welsh, I highly recommend going to the website and joining the community there that's growing day by day. Next slide. So our company is a software company based in Cardiff, and we have created award-winning object storage software. Now, if you don't know what object storage is, I wouldn't blame you. But basically, if you use any sort of cloud storage, OneDrive, G Drive, or any of the Amazon storage, it's basically under the hood is object storage. And we pioneered that back in 2003, having worked for EMC before, working on a similar technology. And we've got a proven track record of revolutionizing even how organizations protect, access and share their video content. That can be broadcasters, CCTV, governments, corporate, etc. Next slide. A little bit of our history. Again, started in 2003, created an online storage as a service platform in 2005, which was 16 years too early at least. And we put the world's first object storage into a created workflow in 2006. And being a typical startup, had our trough of disillusionment, which happened to coincide with living and working in Caerphilly, before moving on to our offices in Cardiff. And from 2008 to 9, we decided to focus only on the UK, because we're a very small team, and only on media and entertainment or video. And from there, we gained customers like the BBC, BT, and a number of post-production companies. And the next natural step was to look for exporting, was to go to France. And as you can see from our journey, we've worked with France TV, Orange, on Orange Cinema Series. So in terms of the companies we work with, if you watch Bake Off, if you watch Strictly, if you watch anything of Orange content cinema series in France, anything of BT Video on Demand, our technology is protecting that content in the background. Next slide, please. So, just a quick apology. I use Keynote to do my presentation, so the conversion to PowerPoint has made the design a bit clunky, but there you go. In 2009, we had very little revenue in France, and that's largely because we didn't focus on it very much, and we didn't give it the respect it deserved. But because we helped the Welsh government when French companies came to Cardiff, welcoming them, showing them around Cardiff, explaining how good it would be to set a business up here, we were invited to an event in the Manylion, which, if you don't know, is the residence of the Prime Minister in France, in Paris, in order to invite a local business or influencer that you might want to work with. And so I had the pleasure of inviting the head of Apple sales in France, Julien Gachot. And next slide, please. And following on from that meeting, when Julien left Apple, he created Ivory, which is a consultancy and also an organization for helping brands outside of France enter the French market. And I think that's been a really key learning, as we'll discuss in tactics next, and as mentioned previously by Phil, unless you can have a local presence in France, I think you can pretty much forget it. You need to have your own local presence, and if you can't afford to do that, or it's not strategically what you need to do at the time, you need a partner, a reseller, or an agent, and you need one that you can trust. And so we basically signed an agreement with Ivory in 2012, and our revenue went from 10,000 euros, pounds, up to $1 million a year in France at points. Next slide. So Object Matrix is still a small company. We're 20 odd people in Cardiff and a couple of people in Spain. So we don't have the budgets or the reach that bigger companies may have to enter a market. So we were very much a startup going into the French market, and our journey and our experiences might be slightly different to those of Phil's. But ultimately, France is very much a relationship-based country to do business. People really want to trust you and know you and understand you. And the best way that you can do that is to make an absolute fool out of yourself, learning the language, using the language in every way that you can. And I think that people, we joke about Parisians being rude and arrogant, but the vast majority of Parisians I've met in a work context have been absolutely welcome and opening because we've made the effort to either translate our content or, when we're in France, have conversations in French where possible. We also attend as many in-market, in-territory events as we can, whether that's expositions or trade shows. And of course, we play to the things that we have in common. We love rugby, we love good food, and we love good wine. And so we have played on that fact many times. So the picture where all the berets, every time Wales play France in Paris, we send out a Welsh beret to the CTOs of the French broadcasters and post-production companies. And there's a little bar called the Bidou Bar. And if you don't come in with the beret on, you're not allowed in. And every 2 years, that's a fantastic event where no business is talked. It's just about building relationships with people. And so those are the sorts of things that you've got to do to help build a relationship and build trust in France. Next slide, please. Oops, I don't think my other slides turned up in this one. Underneath those pink boxes are the customers that we have in France, from Lagardère, Public Senate. Oh, there it is. The Français des Jeux, OCS, Planimonte, the Public Senate, and France TV. Also, two of the largest post-production companies in Europe, Atlantis Television, which you can see from the Seine at Billancourt, and Elephant. So we have a really strong, growing customer base in France, but more importantly, we have a fantastic reseller community. So we work, our agent Ivory manages the channel relationship with partners CTM Solutions and the Fidelio Group, and together we hunt for opportunities and customers, and we service those customers when we have them. So it's a really great story that we have today. Next slide. And one of the things we identified, obviously pre the last 12 months, was the need for cloud storage. We have our own cloud storage platform in the UK. The likes of the ATP, the BBC, etc. use, based out of London and Newport. And we'll be growing that into Paris to service the European market. And that will be happening in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Obviously, I think Phil touched on the point about sovereignty when it comes to the cloud. French generally want the data to be held within French data centers, regardless of the brand. And so, yeah, we'll be launching Matrix Store Cloud into France in a very short time frame, and hoping to expand that out into the rest of Europe. Next slide. And should you wish to get in touch, there are all the credentials. Also very happy to answer any questions you may have following this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I really enjoyed that. It's just so energizing to hear your story, sort of the creativity and your opportunistic approach to business. And you're clearly a very strong networker, which you know, has been stated by yourself and by Phil, and I think confirmed by Isabel, that's really important in France. So thank you very much.
No worries.
We have, I think, officially only a minute for questions. I apologise, there isn't more time, but I don't know, JP, whether we are able to overrun with those who are able to stay on for a little bit. Perhaps we can stay on for a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. If people are happy to stay on, absolutely.
Okay. Then I would like to open the floor. I also, of course, I don't expect everyone to be able to stay. So perhaps speakers, they may have to leave at 5, which is now. If that's the case, let me know. But otherwise, I would like to welcome people to ask questions. If there are any questions.
There are a few in the chat, Yvonne.
Yeah, okay, let me have a look. Yes, Alan Jones, he mentioned the 4G coverage in France to be patchy. Was this a particular question to one of the speakers? Alan?
That's just an observation, really.
An observation.
If I could come in there, Yvonne, I would just say it definitely depends on where you are. So I think, Alan, you mentioned that it was in Brittany, and you asked whether it was about rural Brittany or not. And I can say, from my experience at least, if you're in somewhere like Rennes, then you've got really good quality 4G coverage. It's true in rural France, then yes, there is much worse coverage. It's quite a big country with lots of rural areas, but cities like Rennes in Brittany are kind of the hub of quite a lot of tech companies and cyber companies, so lots of coverage there, less of an issue in the cities.
Thank you, Jordan. And then there's another comment from you, Alan, about certification and observation, I think.
Yes, we were on another webinar this morning, and somebody who exports to the nuclear sector was saying, you know, there's lots of certification for their products, which just confirmed what Phil was mentioning during his presentation.
Yeah, so considered to be a barrier, so you need to develop that understanding. Are there any more questions people would like to ask the speakers or us? giving people a moment. No, I think that's a no. I think it was very clear, and maybe people have to move on. That could be a reason, but I think then we would just like to make it very clear that we invite people to get in touch with us in the Welsh Government office in France for additional information, or to make an introduction, to tell us your story and to see how we may be able to support you. And that's probably the last I would say. Over to you, I think, Ruth, for the final comments.
Yes, so thank you, Yvonne, and thank you also to Jordan, because I know Jordan did a lot of work in organising this. So thank you both for organising and hosting this webinar. It's been absolutely jam-packed full of information, too much to digest in one sitting. So I'm pleased to tell you that we will be sending you all an email with a link to today's webinar, and also copies of the slides, so you can revisit anything that that has piqued your interest and you want to just reinforce in your memory. This is the latest in a series of webinars that we've been doing on specific markets, and if you missed any, you can catch them up on our website at www.businesswales.gov.wales, and we are planning a further 2 seminars in the near future, one on UAE and the other on the USA. So they'll be coming up, so look out for those, probably taking place sometime mid to late May. Finally, all that's left for me to do is to thank each of our guest speakers for giving so generously of their time and sharing their experiences and knowledge with us. Thanks again to Yvonne and Jordan for hosting. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you on another webinar soon. Thank you all. Goodbye.